In 1476, beneath the brooding spires of the castle of Vajdahunyad, a bloodied servant boy was dragged through the snow, screaming that the Countess had ordered him flayed alive for smiling. The boy was 13. His name scratched onto no ledger, his body buried without rites. Locals whispered it was her 7th servant death that winter. Before we continue, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read everyone. Now back to the history they didn't teach you. By spring, the village wells ran red. Livestock refused the stream nearest the keep. Mothers clutched their infants tighter when riders from the castle passed, faces blank beneath iron helms. The Countess, Erzsébet, had begun her own experiments. The blood of the young, she claimed, pulsed with eternity. In the bowels of the fortress, she watched girls stripped of dignity and life, collecting their blood in polished marble basins. Her physician, Dr. Sakely, no more than 30, recorded every trial in a diary bound with human skin. No priest dared confront her. None returned from those summoned within her gates. They said even the crucifixes wept in her orchards. Yet the king sent no envoy. Why? Because she paid him, in florins heavy enough to buy his silence twice over. Erzsébet was no mere noblewoman. She was royalty's butcher, and the king's cousin by blood. Her lands produced more grain than 10 royal estates. Her war taxes funded border defenses. Her beauty once praised in court poems before the deaths began. At 26, she had mourned her husband for 3 years, but refused the widow's veil. They said she entertained visiting noblemen in locked rooms lit only by candlelight and scented with myrrh to mask the iron tang of blood. A young baron, aged 19, vanished after a banquet last seen waltzing with her beneath tapestries of saintly martyrs. His ring was found weeks later in the meat cellar, embedded in the fat of a boar. No charges were laid, no questions asked. Those who asked ceased asking. But whispers grew teeth. By the winter of 1477, a girl of 15 slipped free from the castle kitchens, barefoot and caked in lye, screaming of rooms sealed with iron, of girls hoisted on hooks like game meat. She named names, and among them not just the Countess. The steward, the nursemaid, the chamberlain, even 2 visiting clergy were said to have watched, unblinking, as blood-filled silver goblets. Her hair was scorched away. Burn marks ringed her wrists. Lodged in the village abbey, she survived 3 nights before her throat was slit in her sleep. The abbess was found weeping, saying only, "She saw too much." No inquiry followed, only closed doors and tightened jaws. In the castle, Erzsébet simply laughed when told. She added more mirrors to her chambers, so the dying might see themselves fade, and still, no one dared stop her. Then came the feast of St. Matthias, in the bleak February of 1478, a night throttled by wind and omen. 40 guests, cloaked in sable and suspicion, dined beneath the vaulted ceiling of the castle's grand hall. The venison was oversalted, the wine too sweet, yet no one dared complain, not while Erzsébet sat at the head, lips stained crimson, eyes gleaming like wet coal. A bard from Transylvania had been paid to play, but never touched his lute. He watched the Countess instead, fingers twitching with some knowing dread. At midnight, when the tapestries fluttered without breeze and candles died without smoke, 2 youths were brought out, twins, 17, pale, shackled at wrist and ankle. Erzsébet rose, drink in hand, and proposed a toast to the purity of lineage. The guests clapped nervously. One merchant vomited quietly behind a pillar. What happened after was struck from all records. But in the spring thaw, both twins' hearts were found nailed to opposite gates of the estate, their rib cages picked clean down to ivory. Only the myrrh-scented air remained, clinging long after the snow melted, as if memory itself rebelled against erasure. By midsummer, the estate servants began to vanish in pairs. 2 seamstresses, 2 scullery maids, 2 guards whose armor was found ceremonially arranged outside the chapel, helmets filled with rose thorns. No prayers were said. The chapel doors remained bolted. Inside, some claimed, Erzsébet kept a reliquary of flesh, fragments salted and labeled in ink made of gall. Her hunger for symmetry echoed that of old rites, ancient and outlawed, where blood and balance were sacred currencies. A letter intercepted near Buda hinted at a rite, to preserve her radiance beyond the waning moon. Citing the number 16, 8 boys, 8 girls as tithe, the letter bore no signature, only a wax seal of an eclipse Sunday. Rumors swirled that she no longer dreamed, that sleep was traded for shadowed rituals in chambers lined with far older stones than the castle itself. Still, no army marched, no decree was issued, the throne stayed silent, and the hanging bell above the North Tower, once rung for weddings and harvests, began tolling at untimely hours, once at midnight, once at 3, again just before the first cock's cry, always in 2s, always an unsurd. On the eve of All Saints' Day, 1478, a traveller, brave or foolish enough, knocked at the castle gates. He called himself Father Mihaly, age 42, formerly of the Esztergom Cathedral, robes tattered from the road. He claimed visions had driven him, dreams of crimson rivers and bone-paved cloisters. The guards, hesitant, made the sign of the cross but opened the gates. Erzsébet received him in her moonlit solarium, cloaked in white that shimmered like ghost breath. She smiled, slow and uneven, and offered him wine darker than cherries, thicker than oil. That night, he was seen kneeling before her chambers, hands trembling, whispering Latin psalms through bloodied lips. By dawn, his tongue had been nailed to the bell striker above the North Tower, a warning written in a saint's blood. And yet, no man came to claim the corpse. No church dared demand his return. The snow fell heavier that year, covering the castle like a shroud. No laughter escaped its halls. No songs rose during feast days. Only silence, as if the very stones of Vajdahunyad had learned to hold their breath. The tower, they say, still stands, though no birds alight on its frame. The bell has not tolled since. Late that winter, a letter reached the Archbishop of Pécs, unsigned but sealed with beeswax embedded with human teeth. The parchment stank of smoke and myrrh. It detailed a ceremony of reckoning planned upon the first solstice of 1479, when the night would stretch longest and the veil between worlds hung thinnest. 16 children, all born in the same hour under a blood moon, were to be offered in the crypt beneath the old family chapel, now hidden by briars and thyme. The archbishop burned the letter, but one monk, a novice named Lazar, just 17, copied its contents in secret. He vanished 3 days later. His empty sandals were found outside the monastery well, filled with slimy crimson water that reeked of roses. They say the Countess never aged past 30, that her skin remained pale as porcelain while others withered like fruit in frost. But in the final weeks of that cursed year, something changed. Witnesses swore she flinched at the sight of her own reflection. Servants noticed mirrors covered in veils. Screams grew rarer. Candles burned low in glass, darkened with soot. Then one dawn, the castle gates blew open. Inside emptiness, no countess, no guards, no blood. Only a white gown in the courtyard snow, torn and soaked in something blacker than ink. Her name was never spoken in court again. Her estate seized, her deeds scattered to ash. But the chapel ruins remain, half swallowed by soil and ivy. And still, in certain winters, when the wind claws just right, some swear they hear twin bells echoing from the North Tower, ringing in unholy chorus with nothing left to mourn. They say that in the year 1480, a Vatican envoy vanished on his way through the Carpathians, last seen traveling with 10 riders, all seasoned swordsmen bearing the sign of the cross. None returned. Weeks later, the horses were found grazing wild near the edge of an abandoned village. Saddles slashed open, rosaries tangled in thorn, not a drop of blood and not a soul in sight. The village church had been gutted, its altar defaced with lines of Latin written backwards in dried rose petals and bile. At its center lay a single candle, still burning. No storm could snuff its flame, they said, until a blind girl walked barefoot into the nave and whispered a name no one else dared speak: Erzsébet. That night, the fire finally died. To this day, the castle of Vajdahunyad stands, windows hollow, halls empty. But when the snow falls thick and the wind cuts east, the bell above the North Tower sometimes tolls twice, as if searching for twin hearts long lost to time. In the frostbitten dusk of 1481, one final whisper stirred through Transylvania's courts. A girl, only 12, arrived at the Abbey of Colossus, half-starved and mute, her back flayed in precise, surgical arcs. She bore a relic no child should carry, a chalice swaddled in velvet, bone-handled, rimmed in gold, warm to the touch though snow fell thick around her. She died before dawn, tendons curled like burnt parchment. The abbess dared to open the cloth. Inside the chalice bloomed a lotus carved from hardened blood. Beneath it, a note, no ink, only words etched in rust. Offer 16, drink the heart, see the truth. The abbey was razed by lightning days later, skies unbroken by cloud. No remains were recovered, save one mirror, unshattered amid the ash, facing down into the soil. And so ended the lineage of Erzsébet, Countess of Blood, her legacy swallowed by fire, silence, and frost. But the wind still carries secrets through the bones of Vajdahunyad, and in the depth of winter, if you listen truly, listen, the twin bells ring once more, for what was given, and what can never be undone. And still, somewhere in the cryptic margins of old monastery tomes, a name inked in faded red lingers, Sanguis Virgo, the Blood Maiden. A covenant older than crown or church, believed extinct by the time of Charlemagne, damned by 7 councils, severed by sword and fire. But in 1482, a parchment surfaced in Brasso, its corners singed, its Latin half rewritten in Magyar, describing rites that matched every stain in Erzsébet's reign. It spoke of a vessel shaped by inheritance, a bloodline unbroken since Dacia's fall, and a prophecy that the flesh of 16 would not grant youth, but awaken something buried in stone. Few dared read further. The manuscript vanished days later, taken by a man in clerical robes who left no name, only a dried rose pinned to the abbey gate. And though the castle lies in ruin, the vine-choked chapel crumbled to dust, they say the earth beneath Vajdahunyad still hums when the moon swells full. A low throb like breath deep inside the soil. A hunger not yet sated, a silence that watches, always waiting. And in the final winter recorded by trembling quills before the silence claimed all memory, a boy of 14 wandered freezing into Sibiu, his lips blue, his eyes clouded with visions no child should know. He whispered verses no priest recognized, swore the wind had spoken to him in the voice of a woman who never aged, whose blood ran backward up stone, who walked barefoot across ice without melting it. His fingers clutched a single object, an arrowhead carved from obsidian, threaded on a chain of braided human hair. Before he could speak her name, his tongue blackened and crumbled like scorched parchment. They buried him at the crossroads with salt in his mouth, and no marker above. No records followed, just the lingering tales told in candlelit hearths to keep the children close of a countess who betrayed time, who drank innocence in sips measured by ritual, whose final gift to the world was doubt. Doubt in what perished, and what still waits beneath stone, beneath memory, beneath the too quiet soil of Vajdahunyad. Centuries before Erzsébet's name soured across lips, the Sanguis Virgo was whispered amid the rites of forest-bound druids, their secrets tangled in vine and blood. The final testament drawn in the Book of Thorns, hidden within a slab of altar stone beneath a ruined basilica east of the Tisa, spoke of a sleeper in silk, whose essence would pass through one blood-born woman each generation, cloaked in beauty, wielding dread. The Countess was not born monstrous, they claimed she was chosen. Her birth marked by a lunar eclipse and a magpie's cry at dawn, her mother struck dumb at the sight of her eyes, one dark, one pale as milk. Midwives burned their own blankets after touching her. The cradle was buried after the 6th night. And as she grew, so too did the pull toward silence, toward shadow, toward the forbidden scriptures kept behind false walls in her family's library. Every page tasted of ash and rose. They say her favorite lullaby was sung only once each decade, and only by voices not fully human. No one taught her. She remembered it. And so, when she raised the chalice carved of blood and wished not for youth, but for permanence, something opened beneath the castle. Not a gate, an eye. And when it blinked, snow fell upwards across Vajdahunyad, and for one breathless moment, the wind forgot to howl. So ends the tale buried in time, wrapped in the ragged linens of forbidden rite and royal decay. No court records survive, no lineage claims her bones, yet the land remembers. Beneath the frostbitten soil of Vajdahunyad, where roots coil like veins and stone remembers screams, The stillness is never quite whole. The chapel lies in shattered ruin, yes, but the echo remains half a whisper, half a warning, draped in silence too heavy to name. They say power once summoned cannot be unmade, that what was offered in blood lingers, neither forgotten nor forgiven. And each winter, as candles flicker and shadows stretch long past their source, an unease stirs in the hearts of those who draw near. Is it grief, or guilt, or something older still? Erzsébet sleeps beneath no gravestone, but in the hush between bells she is there. In the breath that fogs glass without cause. In the second heartbeat, trembling beneath your own. In the silence that is not silence at all. The castle of Vajdahunyad still stands, hollow as a throat mid-scream, and perhaps that is fitting, for nothing buried in blood ever truly rests. The priests of Satmar whispered of a final rite, older than the catacombs, concealed by fire and false scripture. They said the last binding to seal the sleeper required not valor, but betrayal. And so it was that one sworn to Erzsébet by blood, a cousin, Ladislas, born 1 hour after her under the same blood moon, entered the chapel beneath the new moon with a blade forged from monk bone and sorrow. He recited no prayer, only a single name etched in the marrow of silence. A name forbidden even among the damned. From beneath the altar, something moved not with rage, but with relief. He carved into his own chest the sigil of the inverted sun and offered his heart to the stone. The chapel sang then, not in sound, but in trembling. Bones in graves cracked, the air wept gold, and Erzsébet, beautiful even in terror, appeared not as maiden nor monster, but as mirror, reflecting everything he'd lost. She did not beg, did not fight, simply stepped into his arms. When the others arrived, all that remained was the blade, still warm, and a trail of black petals leading into the earth. The stones were sealed, the rites unspoken since, but some say the sigil still smolders beneath the altar's ash, pulsing once each solstice like a buried heartbeat. The curse did not end. It was chosen, buried, awaiting release. And in winters when the snow falls sideways, the villagers swear they see footprints in reverse, small, bare, bloodless, walking back toward Vajdahunyad. They never found Ladislas's body, only his name, scratched into the stone floor of the chapel in a spiral that began at the altar and ended in a perfect circle just wide enough for one to kneel. Within that circle, the dust never settled, snow never touched it, not even when gales forced open the broken stained glass. By the first thaw of 1483, the nobility had dispersed, their lips sealed by fear or coin, the libraries burned, the convents abandoned. Only one record remained, hidden within the footnotes of a failing monk's final sermon. She was not punished, she was bound. She is not gone, only turned inward. And so finality eluded Erzsébet, who had craved more than time. She had become time woven through the marrow of myth and memory, lurking not in tombs but in repetition, in ritual, in the 16 candles lit unknowingly by others centuries hence, because some truths are not meant to be disclosed, merely endured. And the silence around Vajdahunyad, it is not decay, it is reverence, or perhaps restraint. For legends born in blood do not fade, they wait. And in the long hush between years, when frost creeps like veins across the earth and bells toll without reason, she listens. And so it is told, never spoken loudly, never written plainly, that the rites of Erzsébet did not die in ash, but drifted like seeds carried by silk wind. They say in a forest near Temesvar, the trees refuse to fall, though axemen swear they strike rot. That beneath one root, bone curves into a perfect spiral, and carved into its surface, the words return, return, return. There, children dream of mirrors with eyes and saltless blood and wake, weeping, always saying the same 3 words. She's not finished. The village elder keeps a book no one lends, wrapped in crimson cloth, its spine warm despite frost. He does not speak of it, only watches the moon, avoids the chapel ruins, and prays to no known god. And each time the bells of Vajdahunyad toll, even now, long past any memory carved in flesh, a crow lands on the chapel stone, gazes east, and caws, but no echo answers. The silence has teeth. It waits, as she does, for the circle to close, for frost to fall upwards once more. So let it remain, half remembered and wholly feared, not inked onto parchment but etched into breath, stilled by dread. Erzsébet, daughter of blood and silence, is not a tale to be told, but an echo to be heeded. Her shadow stains more than stone, it slips between generations, waiting for the exact curve of cheek, the same birthmark beneath the eye, the moment when 16 hearts forget to beat as one. Do not seek her, do not name her, for in every myth lies a seed, and some seeds bloom in the dark. Vajdahunyad endures not as ruin, but as warning, a carcass of grandeur still whispering in languages older than fire. The bells do not mourn, they summon, and when they toll again, not by hand but by hunger, the final frost may not fall, it may rise. And there, in the cold that devours sound, her name waits unspoken. Erzsébet, still listening, still choosing, still beginning. So let this be the end, not of tale nor truth, but of telling. For what remains of Erzsébet is not fit for story, but silence, the kind that coats the lungs like ash and settles behind the eyes like grief. Her rites live not in parchment or rite books, but in the hush before snowfall, the widening eyes of babes born beneath blood moons, in forgotten corners where mirrors are turned to walls. The Countess did not die. She was not interred. She became something else, a rhythm beneath the earth, a whisper behind breath, the space between twin tolls of a bell. Her legacy thrums not in blood, but in stillness, in waiting. So hush now, there is nothing left to say. Only the wind knows the words, and it will not speak them twice. And in the hollow hush that follows the last toll, when breath hangs heavy and frost clings to stone like regret, the tale fades not to peace, but to pause. For Erzsébet does not end. She recedes, like dusk pulling light from sky, like memory slipping between cracked lips in sleep. What she offered was never beauty, nor fear, it was knowing that beneath every ritual, every silence, every closed door and vanished child, there lies a choice made long before birth. The choice to look away, to forget, to pretend no bells ever rang. But they did, they do, not loud, but deep beneath marrow, beneath dream, beneath knowing. So, if you ever walk near Vajdahunyad, and the snow begins to fall upward, and the forest tilts quiet as held breath, do not look back, not because she will find you, but because you've already heard her. And once you've heard her, you are part of the silence, forever. Some say it ends with silence, others with the sound of feathers falling on stone. But the truth is crueler. The last memory of Erzsébet is not a scream nor a spell, but a lullaby sung softly by a girl with her mouth sewn shut beneath a root that never flowers. There, in soil too cold for rot, the Countess dreams not of beauty or blood, but of time undone. She waits where hours unravel and footsteps echo in reverse. And if, in the bleakness of a moonless winter, you stumble upon a mirror turned face down in the snow, do not lift it, do not peek, for what lies behind your reflection might not be your own. It may glance back with eyes pale as milk and a smile older than grief, and then perhaps it will be your voice that joins the wind, whispering her name, not to remember, but to return. Return, 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 that is how the last sermon of the vanished monk ended, his quill frozen mid-ink, his breath a frost upon the vellum. He had written it not in Latin, but in a spiral of runes no one could decipher, only mimic, drawn again and again in circles on monastery walls before the abbey collapsed into silence. Now, centuries layered like ice upon this cursed lineage, the tale folds inward like a wound that never clots. Erzsébet does not sleep beneath moss or tomb, nor does her name fade with dust. She coils inside the stories no one finishes, inside lullabies hummed without memory, inside cold so pure it burns. Wherever 16 candles are lit in symmetry, she listens. Wherever mirrors are buried face down, she watches. And when snow rises instead of falling, when bells toll with no hand to strike them, when wind stutters like a breath withheld, know that her gaze has returned. Not out of vengeance, not desire, but hunger. Hunger for silence wide enough to hold her name again. Last spoken by a girl with no tongue. Last heard by the earth itself. Erzsébet, 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 The name you tried to forget will remember you. And so the Countess waits, not in hate nor mercy, but in the unclaimed stillness between. Her legacy is not carved into monument or manuscript. It is felt like the pressure before thunder, the breath caught before sleep, the quiet knock no hand admits to making. Vajdahunyad may linger in ruin, but it holds its breath still, as though the land itself remembers the cost of silence. She needs no grave. Her monument is memory forged in fear, myth bound by blood. And when the frost thickens, mirrors fog without reason, and bells tolled twice where no bell stands, no, this is not the ending. It never was. For Erzsébet is not gone. She is beneath, awaiting the next moment of forgetting, to begin again. So close your eyes if the snow begins to rise, and let no song tremble on your lips. For the Countess keeps no time but that of breath and breaking. Her story does not pause with parchment's end, it bears forward in silence, in the chilling lull between remembrance and return. This is no ending, only the last word we're allowed to speak. Erzsébet, then hush, for to name her again would be to unseal what the earth itself bound in dread, and some echoes, no matter how softly breathed, will always find their way back home.